See, just wanted to discuss the work of Philip Agee. You got this book, White Paper, Whitewash, interviews with Philip Agee on the CIA and El Salvador. And I was listening to talks by Philip Agee on the Covert Action Quarterly website, and those videos are archived. Let's see. I think. Okay, so anyway, if you look at the Covert Action Quarterly, they had a couple videos on El Salvador, and this is what this book is about, is that Philip Agee's career as a CIA officer was funding political parties to change election results, to maintain a favorable business investment in developing countries, so-called developing countries, and then to a third of his work was planting propaganda in the newspapers, so false news stories about the Cuban military as a communist threat. And so this book is the first section of the book is all about the various propaganda that he had planted in Latin America and Africa, as lies about the Cuban military, and so what I wanted to point out was the connection between Central America and Indochina, where the CIA was relying on psychological warfare, and using these type of propaganda lies to convince people of the evil of communism. And I'm not saying communism is not evil. That's not the point. It's just that the CIA realized that people were being convinced that they supported communism, and so the problem was a ideological problem of political indoctrination. And so in Indochina, each the villages had communist organizers that were part of the village, that were people living in the villages, and the villages supported this ideology of sharing and working together. And you had the same problem in Central America where you had the videos that I was watching from Covert Action Quarterly. They talk about how you had these basically like indigenous villages in Central America where they're autonomous, living off the land, but they would also they were supported by the liberation theology movement, and the farmers and workers had organized cooperatives, but there was also some communist guerrillas that were living in the villages. And so then when they interviewed the Salvadoran military, their response to the uh, massacres and terrorism of the villagers was that this was not official policy of the military, and that it's just some bad actors within the military that they cannot control. And of course, that's a very obvious, like, what's the phrase? Plausible deniability. So it works both ways, where they mention in this book how, like the president of the United States controls the CIA, but the president's not going to directly say that Fidel Castro should be assassinated. So it's just kind of the president maintains a plausible deniability. And so this is what Bertrand Russell called the an error of logical types. And it was discussed by Gregory Bateson, who actually did work for the CIA in psychological warfare and using this type of analysis from anthropology. So he realized that if you could co-opt, hello, if you could co-opt the indigenous beliefs, then that could be turned against them as for psychological warfare. And this is indeed was the basis in the Philippines and then in Indochina. And so in Asia, they use the idea of the vampire, the fear of the vampire, to like terrorize the villagers. And so with Gregory Bateson, his point was like, well, you have these logical errors that are digital in the sense that the actual structure, rational thinking breaks down. And then obviously, like when you have a fascist genocide, that's just like wiping out the poor people, then it's justified by using these same logical errors that then create plausible deniability. So they can just say, well, and then they use propaganda with psychological warfare. So they So in the big case that Philip Agee points out is that the argument was that the Salvadoran guerrillas were being supplied by Vietnam and Cuba as their main weapon sources. But what Philip Agee realized was actually the main weapon source was from the Contra, the U.S. weapons from the Contras that were being used um, in Nicaragua and then through Costa Rica and Honduras. And so the weapons were coming from mainly Honduras and Costa Rica and not Nicaragua, um, because that's where the Contras were based, and they were selling the weapons in the black market. And I had always wondered, how the FMLN was getting their weapons, and of course Cuba did have advisors there in advising the um, FMLN, but they were not the main source of the weapons that the guerrilla fighters were using. But the problem was, again, this issue of psychological warfare, where you had the people believing in liberation theology and cooperation and socialism, and then the military were assassinating the union activists, the intellectuals and the priests and stuff like that. And so that's when the poor people took up military weapons to and guerrilla warfare training to try to defend themselves against the regime. And so that's what happened, but then of course the US would then spent like billions of dollars. Hi. I'm just discussing this book, Philip H. So anyway, that's pretty much all I wanted to say, is that this is how genocide is then justified through these errors of logical type, where you're saying, oh, we're not really doing anything because it's just some bad actors in the military that we can't control. It's not like an official policy of the military. And so that's just gonna leave it at that.